Hello, and welcome to our weekly book club episode here at Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Amanda, and my fabulous co-host is...
Hello, I'm Megan.
Hey. Okay, so, yes, we run a podcast book club. Not familiar with that? Well, we'll fill you in on how it works in just a moment.
Absolutely. So we read all kinds of books about homeschooling, parenting. I mean, heck, we even threw in a ringer about menopause at the end of last year, which has come in very handy as I progress through menopause and send Amanda frantic texts like, why am I bleeding again? So the menopause one, if you're interested, go back. It's a winner. So you're welcome to read along with us, but you can also just tune in and listen to kind of our Sparks Note style digest of the books as well. Typically, we haven't read the books before, so sometimes we'll tell you that you really should pick up a copy, like we love our current book. Other times we'll be honest with you and be like, save yourself some time. There's some nuggets here and we'll tell you what they are, but the rest of it, not so much.
Yep. Every once in a while, they're a real dud. And I could usually find something that's like worth it in each book, but not always, right? But our current book, it's a good one. We absolutely recommend picking these up because we are previewing a trilogy of books meant for kids. And this series would make a great read aloud if that's what you want to do. I'm never going to do a read aloud. If you listen to us, you know that. But you can also just read it yourself, then toss it to your kids, and then discuss it together afterwards. And actually, I'm totally planning on trying to talk Meagan into helping me create like a quick unit study, novel study of sorts about this trilogy once we're done, because I think it's worth it.
Ooh, I would love that. I'm excited. I love a good unit study. All right. So before Amanda introduces the book, we want to remind you that we are a secular and progressive podcast. Okay. We aren't sitting over here like handmaids opening conversations with blessed be the fruit or affirming quotes from the book with praise be, right? The book
No.
we are currently reading discusses religion, but from a secular perspective. And it might be a very useful tool for answering your kids' pressing questions like, why do other families go to church on Sundays and we don't?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like full disclosure, we've talked about it on the regular podcast before, but our family, we don't church. Like we do not church at all. Full stop. Doesn't happen. But religion is so pervasive in our society and even in our own extended family. They go to church, they have Bibles in their homes, they talk about these things. And so I think it's important, right? In our home, we study all types of mythology, and that includes Christianity. So our current book is The Belief Book by David McAfee. If he's listening and I got that wrong, I'm very sorry. Feel free to correct me. I'd love to talk with you. And Chuck Harrison. And I need to say a great big I'm sorry for last week because I did not mention Chuck Harrison as an author because I don't know, I just got it confused in my head and I was like, oh, he's an illustrator and we don't usually include illustrators when we're doing things, blah, blah, blah. But I've been reading and now I know that he is a co-author and like I co-host this podcast and I'd be a little offended if people were like, oh, Meagan and her Homeschool Moms Unfiltered podcast. Like, so yes, we're very sorry. And the book is by David and Chuck. They both helped write it. Okay. So anyway, that said, we read the first half last week. So feel free to catch that discussion in our episode queue. It's like not too far back, be 2 episodes back probably at this point. And this week we will be finishing the first book of the trilogy. And then next week we'll be picking up with the Book of Gods. Let's dive in.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
So I have to say for my page numbers, I often talk about the fact that I read on Kindle because I'm not based in the US and it's not easy for me to get English books. But I've been reading at the beach more this week since we've been in Aruba and I have my font really, really giant so I can see in the bright light. And so my page numbers are usually a shit show at book club. I can't even imagine what I did to you this week. I was like, I don't know.
Some of them I was able to figure out and correct, and some of them I was like, I don't know, but it's fine. Close enough.
In the book? Are we reading the same?
Like, and it's in the same section, and it'll be fine.
All right. We'll see.
So praise be. All right. So today we're starting with the chapter called Myths. It starts on page 39. And I think I have the very first quote, but we're pretty close on this one. So it says, quote, We know that people all over the world believe completely different things about where we came from and how we got here. The stories they tell show that. For instance, while some ancient Greek, Egyptian, and other cultures believed that the world was hatched by a cosmic egg, others told creation stories of a giant animal that was sent from the sky to build the entire planet out of sticks and mud. We also know something else for sure. They can't all be right. Then he kind of goes on and it says, well, at the time, they were thought by many to be facts. These stories are now considered myths.
Yeah, I had the same quote that you just read. We also know something else for sure. They can't all be right. And that's the thing, right? It's like, it just takes such an incredible amount of nerve, I think, to be like, of course, my version is the right one. You know, the rest, or like the entire country of India, that's like one of the biggest, most populated countries in the whole entire world, they're all wrong because my version is right. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
it's so hard to, I think, sit back and kind of take that stance. But, you know, here we are. So it's just, that was my big takeaway from that section was everybody thinks their version is the right version
Mm.
with so much that it's just, it's amazing. So I had a little bit further on this blurb that's here that I thought was really interesting, where it says a myth is a story that was once said to be true, but in some cases, people still consider them to be so. Even though today we know that many of them can't possibly be true, there's often no way to prove or disprove their truthfulness. Those beliefs can be confusing for everyone because they can't be verified or tested by smart people or anyone else. They have to be accepted as true on blind faith and nothing else. And I thought herein lies the rub with religion. If you start to question because things don't logically make sense, or because scientifically, which we'll get into the scientific method today, like scientifically, there's proof out there that says this isn't really the way things happen, that if you start to ask those questions, that's not a shortcoming on the religion, or it's not a crack or a fault in the religion. That's you, that you don't have enough faith and you need to work on that. And it puts the onus on you. And there's a tremendous amount of guilt in that, with that sort of like, I am not diligent enough. I'm not faithful enough. I don't believe enough. And I just thought, like, what an incredible mind fuck for people to experience, where it's like, oh, but scientists have proven that these rocks are X number of millions of years old or whatever. I learned creationist science, so forgive me when I don't have the actual numbers, but I know enough to know that there's rocks out there that prove that creation science isn't accurate. And, you know, and the fact that if you're like, well, but I'm looking at this data from all these scientists, but okay, but that's because you don't believe enough. That's because you don't have enough faith. And not only is that a guilt trip in this life, but you're potentially risking your eternal life and that of your connection with your family and this and that. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's intense. And for kids to be feeling that must just be like, woof, right? Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. You hear, like, I have a little bit of like a thing with the Duggars that have podcasts now. Like, some of the adult girls have podcasts. Do you ever catch those in your news feeds? I don't listen to the whole podcast, but because I stay and watch the clips when they cycle through and I watch the whole clip, it gives me more of them. And they've talked about having these crises of faith because they're still Christians, but they're not cult Christians anymore, right? A lot of them they wear pants now and all that kind of stuff, right? But they talk about this guilt that they grew up with and this crisis of faith of believing that there was something wrong with them, that they didn't believe enough and they didn't pray enough and they didn't do that. And it's just, it's a lot. Anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then I think I have the next note, which I thought was really good, because you mentioned, Amanda, like you still have family members or friends, neighbors, whoever, that church. And so I thought it was great that it's here where it says people who believe in unverified things are not dumb or bad. And since this is a book that is meant for a children's audience, because you probably have grandparents that are, you know, in that boat or something, depending on what your family makeup looks like. Later down below, it says, so were our ancient ancestors liars? No, they believed in these stories so much that they became their facts, their truth. And that's the same for people today. This is true for them, and it doesn't make them stupid and it doesn't make them bad. It's just a different belief system than what the rest of us have, which is why this is called the belief book.
Yeah. So I I have similar notes. I am going to say that if you're on page 40, where it says people who believe in unverified things aren't dumb or bad, if you have a kiddo who's a little bit older and you have been talking about current events and things that are going on, you should take some extra time with this page and tease out some of this information, right? Because I think there are a lot of things going around right now, right? There are people who currently believe that Biden was killed in 2020 and now it's robot clones of him, and that's why he has a cancer diagnosis so that they can actually kill off all the robot clones and get back, right? Like, people who believe that unverified garbage, they are dumb. And I think it's
Yeah.
okay to tease out some of these like really bizarre conspiracy theories versus faith-based beliefs and where that is. And you can also use it as an example of to help build some understanding and compassion of how some people really do truly believe conspiracy theories, and that it's not just that they're totally dumb, although they could probably use some help on that front. But that's a whole other. And then, yeah, that idea of like, well, people aren't liars if they have faith. It's just they believe a different set of principles and they focus on different things. And there are scientists. There are a lot of well-known scientists out there who she said we're going to get into the scientific method later, but a lot of scientists who kind of say like, well, you know, again, I don't church. This is not really my cup of tea, but there that idea of like, well, it doesn't hurt me to believe it. And like the cost benefit analysis means that if I believe it and I have a better chance, and like, but it doesn't hurt. Like and so like, well, I mean, okay, if that's the route you want to go,
Like hedging
it's
your
worth,
bets.
yeah, exactly. But it's worth keeping that in mind. I feel like, especially on page 40, 41, when you're talking about these specific things. Okay, so I have the next one. It's on page 43. And the quote says, giant men and women who could change their shape and do magical things became legendary heroes in the minds of the storytellers and myth makers. They were larger than life itself. These super beings who had explained everything and who had answered all of our questions became so loved that people started to worship them, and myths became gods. And then it goes on to explain worship is a kind of deep respect or love. I thought that was a great transition of how you kind of get from this idea of myths to like, when does a nebulous myth become a god? So I liked that transition.
Yeah, I do too. Then this is where we get into the scientific method, where a couple of pages on in my dysfunctional Kindle, it's page 44. I don't know what page it's actually on.
Same. You're good. Yeah.
Okay. What do you mean? But it says, so we have these two kind of guides through our book that if you haven't been reading all this time, their names are Dave and Chuck. And we kind of see things through their eyes sometimes. So it says, Dave and Chuck love the stories about gods that other people worship. But when they are looking for what's real in the world, they use the scientific method to get there. And that's why I was like, yeah, I mean, we have dinosaur bones that can be carbon dated, and we have rocks, and we have erosion, and we have all of these things that we know tell us the real age of the earth, that we know tell us that dinosaurs existed and when they existed and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, science is a real thing, which is great. It's one of the pillars of our podcast is that science is real.
Yeah. And, for me, just the very next paragraph starts with a long time ago, myths from family and other people were the only way of understanding where we came from and how we got here. Today, science is thought to be a much better way of learning the facts about the world, but you don't have to be a scientist to learn it. You've been practicing the basics of scientific methods since you were a baby. And what I found interesting about that specific paragraph was that multiple times in this book, when I did the first read, something would get a red flag. And the vast majority of the time that it got a red flag, it was because I'm like, oh, I bet that's going to upset people. Or something that I was like, I feel like that maybe goes like a little too far one way or the other. And then when I come back and reread it, I'm like, oh, I don't even really know why I thought why I had such a strong reaction to that the first time I read it. And this chapter is totally one of those that I'm like, I know when I first read it, I thought, "Ooh, that's a red flag worthy paragraph." And then when I reread it, I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes total sense. I just feel like that happens so much with this book, which just goes to show no matter where you're at on your deconstructing journey, your decolonization journey, your we don't church journey, unpacking religious trauma, whatever that looks like, there's still so much work to be done. And I think that this is why this series is so great. And I think it's why you should be doing it with your kids. I think it's why you should read it first yourself and then have your kiddo read it and then you read it again to be able to talk through these things. But yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I was thinking when you said that, the reason it probably got a red flag the first time through is because not that many people are making these statements, especially in a children's book, to be
Yeah.
so bold and to kind of come out with this. And so it really is pretty groundbreaking on that front, which is a nice change of pace. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. So our next section starts on page 47 in my book, and it's called Gods. And there's a great explanation kind of right at the beginning that talks about why gods exist. And it starts off by saying that you're a god because we are all gods in our own right. And it says, I mean, we as humans did invent them after all, is kind of the clarification there. So it says, we created them for the same reasons we created anything else, to answer our questions and to help make the world seem a little less dark. And I thought that was a pretty great analogy, or pretty great explanation for how gods came to be and how they're just like us, or they're a manifestation of our imagination, or whatever the case might be. So I liked that one.
Yeah. They go on that into that a little bit more. But before that, he brings up, and we both have this same one. He brings up this idea: Superman is as much of a god as Jesus is. And this is one of those red flag city for anyone who's thinking not as a not churcher. And he goes on and says, like, they both have supernatural abilities and powers. They both helped to save the world, and they were both created by people.
I was reading this yesterday when we were at the beach, and you can create little notes in the Kindle. This explains some of the Amazon reviews. The first sections where I was like, okay. Because last week we had talked about the fact that neither one of us had looked at the Amazon reviews. Have you had a chance since then? I know you've had a really busy
No, I
week.
didn't. Oh, no, this week, not this week. No,
Yeah.
not this week.
I think I was actually quite surprised at how positive they were. I was expecting it to
Okay.
be way worse. And I think part of it was just expectations. Some people were expecting it to be kind of an introduction of all the types of religions and gods and stuff like that, which, first of all, this is a trilogy. And so there's more coming. You have to read all the books. And there's a little bit of that in here, but not a ton. And then the other perspective was like, yeah, this tells parents basically not to brainwash your kids into religion, but they're brainwashing them to atheism, was the take in the Amazon, not me.
Yes.
Right. And so I was like, oh, okay, this explains some of the Amazon reviews when you compare Superman to Jesus. That's going to do it. Right.
Yeah.
The pearl clutchers are at their keyboards angrily typing as we speak.
Yes. Well, there is that. Boo-hoo. Okay. So just on the next page, page 49, I pulled out basically the whole page. So it says, quote, every culture around the world has gods. They come in all shapes and sizes and act in all different ways. Some gods are said to be really nice, while others are thought to be mean. And they all demand one thing: you have to believe in them for them to have power. If you don't, many of them swear they will make your life stink. Again, this is written for kids, so that's why they're going to make your life stink. Other gods even invent a new afterlife and say they will be mean to you in that life too. And I just thought, like, wow, that is such a great way to explain it, because it's super true. And my kiddo had recently asked me something about hell, and I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, it's like this awful place that you go if you're not good, but then like sometimes you can be in certain religions, you can be good, but it still doesn't get you a ticket out of hell. And like, I don't like, this was a good way.
Well, like on the flip side, I remember always questioning when I was a kid, how you could be the most horrible person, right? You could have killed, X
Oh
number of
yeah.
thousands of people, right? You could be Hitler. And the moment before you kill yourself as Hitler, say, I've accepted Jesus into my heart, which according to many sections of Christianity, that is it. That is the one and only way that you need to do to be saved. And I'm like, see, you killed 6 million Jews, but you said at the end of the moment, right? And how many people? I think 30 million people died during World War II, I think is like somewhat of the number, if I'm working off the top of my head. But then in the moment before you killed yourself, you said, I accept Jesus. And that's it. You're good. You're absolved. You get to go straight to heaven. I'm like, that just
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. Like that never made sense to me.
Except in some religions, the fact that you killed yourself then also like
Right.
nullifies that I believe in Jesus way.
Mortal
But
sin.
this right? Exactly. This whole thing of like all the different rules and all the different myths and the systems that you have to work within.
I saw a meme not that long ago that I saved, and it was something like believing in a God who loves you unconditionally, but only if you follow all of the conditions. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was
Sounds
like,
about
oh,
right.
man.
Well,
Oh my goodness. All right. So I think I might have the next note. Okay. Yes. So on page 50, and I didn't write them all down, but he just kind of starts here with an introduction, a very high level introduction of some of the world religions like Hinduism, Shintoism, Judaism, Christianity. And then he goes into some like a god named Lono, who's a Polynesian god. And he's just kind of giving examples to add some context of some of the other things that he's talking about. I mean, it is by far a complete list, but it is great for kind of adding some kind of like when you teach a kid something and then there's a hands-on component and the hands-on component is the thing that really like drives it in. It's like we've been talking in this book about theory. And so now we've put some names and some specifics to some of these things. And so I liked this upcoming section here. It was very worthwhile, I thought.
yeah. Yeah, that thing. Like there's so many more. And that's
Right.
what he says. My next quote is actually on page 52. And he says, there are thousands of gods from cultures all around the world. And this is only a small list. Over time, some gods will be forgotten and many others will be created. Gods are popular ideas, mainly because creating stories about them is fun. We like gods because they're a lot like you and me. They can be sad and cry. Gods can even be jealous and angry, just like you. And it's true, gods are like the ultimate personification. We love to make them like just like us, but with even more power.
Yeah. And as two curly-haired individuals, do you not feel like your hair is made of snakes? All right. So before we continue, we have a few more sections to read. But before we continue, we wanted to share a really exciting update about our book club. So we have released 50 plus book club episodes in the last year with the two of us yapping about books and sharing our thoughts. But we are getting ready to broaden the conversation, and I'm super pumped about it. So starting in September, book club, instead of being this weekly episode that you're currently listening to, will be held in our Patreon community via Zoom. And you might be thinking, crap, I'd have to actually read the book to show up then. And no, you do not. You could still show up. I mean, heck, you want to show up with a glass of wine and a messy bun and be a fly on the wall or contribute your thoughts. Come, we do not judge. But the goal is to make it more conversational, more engaging, more interactive, boost our community, all of the above.
Yeah, no, exactly. So our all access members, they will meet 2 times a month to discuss the book and just, build community. It's like, I don't know, it's hard to explain how much easier it is to make friends and build community when you have something that you're kind of talking about that was like that foundation, the point of commonality. And so we're just looking to transition into this fun new version of book club. And we're also holding weekly meetings on Patreon already now, and they're just so much fun. And so we really think that like book club this way, it's gonna be an awesome kind of next stage of Patreon. Okay, so our first book is going to be probably a really good conversation, I think. So we're starting this new thing in September, and the September book will be Brave New Worlds: How AI Will Revolutionize Education and Why That's a Good Thing, right? And I'll be the first to say I'm not sold on the fact that AI is a good thing, and I'm not sold on the fact that it revolutionizing education is necessarily a good thing. But we've heard really interesting positive reviews about this book, so I'm really curious to see. It is by Salman Khan, and yep, it's that Khan, the Khan Academy guy, and we rave about Khan Academy and the fact that it's free and what it provides to the education community, parents and caregivers in general. So I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, right, whether you love AI, you think it's scary, you're pissed about the environmental impact, which we totally get. We're on board with you on that, right? I think the one thing we can agree upon is that it's not going anywhere, right? There's no
Yep.
putting these horses back in the barn. I mean, and if you think about it, this AI evolution has been so long. You remember that little clip it paperclip from Microsoft Word that way back in the day, right? That was
Yeah.
AI, right? I mean, it's been evolving this whole time, Alexa's in
Yep.
our house and all that stuff. So it'll be interesting to discuss how it will affect education specifically. And I think too, like what the world might look like when our kids launch into the world. I mean, we're supposed to be preparing them for adulthood in the real world and all of that. What is the real world even going to look like as AI continues to evolve at this exponential rate that it has been? So I think it'll be an interesting
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, that's it. It should be a good conversation. And so, yeah, we would love for you to come and join us. We will, of course, link our Patreon here in the show notes. Wherever you're listening or watching, it'll be in those notes. You can also just search for us, whether you go into Patreon specifically, or if you just go to Google or whatever your browser of choice is, and type in Patreon, Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. We'll pop up. We should be the first one because we're the only ones. You can use the code bookworm to take, it's all one word, bookworm, to take 90% off your first month of our all access membership. So if you want to get in on it, please come join us. And then there's also a kind of like a promo special thing on Patreon itself that if you sign up annually for the whole year, you get 20% off if you sign up at the very beginning for the whole year. So I'm all about a discount, right? So yeah.
Yeah. And now's an awesome time to join because we're actually running a poll right now on what day and time book
Mhm.
club should be every month when it starts in September. We haven't decided that yet. We are going to listen to our membership base and we're just going to rock the majority time slot. So come and let us know what works for you so that if you want to join book club later, you're not like, I can never make it on Tuesdays at 6. So let us know that now so that we can factor it into the decision-making process. So and even though book club doesn't start till September, you can join our live meetings. We have one every single week all throughout the summer. You'll also get our monthly themed unit study that goes out over there and all sorts of other perks on Patreon. So all good stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's it, right? Like for right now, we have all of these meetings every month, and it's like we move them around and we have different, like afternoon and evening times and different days and all of that, just trying to like catch people when it works. And so if you're worried about whether or not you have the availability, we do move it around and try to make sure that people can catch it. But for book club, we are specifically asking folks, when is this going to work for you? What day, what time? So that we can try to catch the most people and really have that. We've talked about it before. Megan and I met during a book club. We met during an online book club. You can make great friends that way. And we still have a wonderful group that we have a special chat that we talk to on the regular and we meet when we can and that sort of stuff. And it all came out of a book club. So book clubs are a great place to find your people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we only met in person for the first time earlier this year. So we've been
Yep.
virtual friends for a really long time. It is the power of a virtual friend is a really big thing, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's it. Virtual friends are the new pen pals. If
Yep.
you had a pen pal that you were excited to meet in real life at some point in your, someday, this is it. Virtual friends. Here we are. Okay.
Yep.
So again, we would love to see you. We'd love to see you over on Patreon in general. We would love for you to join our book club. But in the meantime, we need to get back to the belief book. So let's do that. We are starting a new section, a new chapter. It's called Religions. Okay. So it opens on page 55 with, how do people choose a religion? Well, more often than not, they don't. The religion chooses them. Okay, not exactly. Everyone is different, but many people take on the religion of their family or even their culture.
Yeah, I had actually made that note earlier in the reading, and I was like, yeah, but the religion that you end up being is largely determined by where you are born, which you have no control over. It is a
Yeah.
cosmic coincidence. So, yeah, I mean, it's all quite by chance. So, but then when it came up in the book, I took it out of my notes to bring up because I was like, oh, he's way ahead of me there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that thing. It's true, right? Like I talk a lot about the fact that I do not church. I actively do not church, but I grew up churching quite a bit. And so the church that I was born into is not the church that I attended as a high schooler, is not the church that I participated in college, is not the church that I participated in the first time I was married, and is not the church or the entire belief system that I ultimately walked away from when I got my divorce and told I was going to hell for getting a divorce from someone who wouldn't know monogamy if it walked up and slapped him in the face. There was like a whole lot going on there. And none of those I really went out and completely just picked out of thin air. It was all a series of what was around me, the people that were in my life, how I wanted to connect with them, the ways that we wanted to move forward together. It was not a totally random choice by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. And I mean, I think to the starting point that you just brought up, there's a thing here on 55 where it says parents can teach young children anything and odds are they'll believe it. And that's most people's starting point in religion. You're
Yeah.
born into this thing. I mean, how many children are dressed up in white satin gowns and, have water put on their heads, have their penises sliced off, whatever it is. And you're like a week old. I mean, clearly you haven't made this choice. And so it's like this thing that just kind of comes into your life. So yeah, those things are there. It's interesting because I used to teach a class on Outschool, and we looked at, as a small slice of the class, we looked at the civil rights movement. And there's kind of this iconic photo of this little girl holding up a sign that says, "We want to keep our schools white." And she's probably 5 or 6 years old. And I would put it
Mhm.
up on the screen, and my students were anywhere from like 8 to 12, usually in this class. And I would say to them, "How old do you think this girl is?" And they would all kind of guess, and we'd narrow it down to an appropriate age for her. And I'd be like, "How do you think this young girl knows that she wants her school white? Like, how does this happen? Like, where might she have gotten this idea?" And right off the bat, it's like parents and this and that. And then we kind of really drill down, like, where else might she see it? And they're like, "Oh, well, it's probably like on the television or radio programs or in the newspaper." I'm like, "Yeah, how about at school?" And then we bring up church. Would this be something that's preached from the pulpit in church? I mean, this is the deep South. She's going to church on Sundays more likely than not. And they're like, "Oh, yeah." And I'm like, "Yeah, exactly. This was the message of Christianity." This kid didn't know anything about this stuff. She just was repeating what she had been told and what was around her. And it had become her foundational belief system. And so it really can be a good thing or not a good thing, depending on what you're being told, because they will most likely believe most of what they're told at that age.
Yeah. No, it's so true.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't like having never lived in the deep South. The mountains of North Carolina is the closest I got. Like I consistently forget about like just what gets preached in a lot of churches, right? Like it blows my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I like that. There was a pastor video that just went viral on Facebook last week or something about even if your husband beats you, it's still like terrible if you leave him or something because you made a commitment. And it was this whole thing. And I was just like, thankfully it was being shared and all of the comments were like, what the hell? It wasn't like, amen, brother. But there's still people sitting in that church that didn't get up and walk out that are put 10% of
Yeah.
their income into that basket. Right. So those of us on Facebook are
Yeah.
looking at it go, what the hell? And somebody thought it was a good idea to take that video and put it online. Like somebody was like, the
Yeah.
world needs to hear this message.
Yeah. This message. This is the one.
Okay, then on 59, there's an activity here for kids to make up their own God. It gives you some parameters as far as what would you want it to look like? What would you want that to help people? What do you think your God's job should be? And so there's a free space if you have the physical book where you can draw a picture and you can write a description. And it just kind of shows this thing that anybody can create a God. It doesn't have to be this great spiritual awakening that the gods that we do have in different societies and cultures were created by human beings. And so you can do the same thing as a human being. So I like that. It's always a good hand
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. It is interesting. My kiddo did a class an online class that was about mythology. And at the end, they had to do a research presentation on a chosen mythology. And it was interesting because the teacher tried to be very careful about not offending certain people by saying that it couldn't be a living mythology. But then where they drew the line between living mythology and no longer living, because they're not even really dead mythology, it was like super bizarre. Like Polynesian mythology was no longer a living mythology, but Christianity wasn't an option. And I was like, well, I think there are a lot of Polynesians who might take offense to that, like it's, yeah.
It's an
But
interesting time too to be teaching something like that. Ian was taking an online stock market class, and then on Thursday nights, he has like a weekly stock market current events class where they talk about what's going on in the world and how it might impact the stock market. And it's on Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern, I think. And so if you're listening to this in the future, this past Thursday, was the big day of the Elon Musk, Donald Trump breakup. The bromance has ended. It was the mudslinging tweets and the whole thing. And so the teacher's trying to talk about current events that might affect the stock market, but not step out of line. And Liam was like, oh my gosh, I felt so bad for him. And yet it was so funny trying to watch him have this conversation. I was like, yeah, that'll do it.
yeah. No, that's it. I do not envy any teacher who's trying to teach, like
Walk
a
that
cross
line.
section of society and having to walk the line of like, oh yeah, no, I don't know.
So then I have like one teeny tiny note at the bottom of page 60, which basically is just to say from this point on, the next handful of paragraphs, which in my giant font Kindle book was like 4 or 5 pages, I just thought were like solid gold. And I'm not going to sit here and read them all because get the book. It's worthwhile.
Yeah.
You have at least one thing that you pulled out of that section that we can call out without reading the whole book.
Yeah. So on page 61, there's a quote. They say, for certain religions, many of their rules are about how you have to believe in their God only and not believe in other people's gods. But they also have rules you must follow in order to keep getting all of the good stuff they say they give you for obeying them. They might even tell you to be the best person ever in the whole wide world and tell everyone you know about how awesome your religion is in the hopes that they'll join it too. And it's so true. And it just keeps going on and on. And it's that, like you mentioned earlier, the like, you can get unconditional love as long as you follow all of these conditions, and this like, and, and it'll be wonderful as long as you believe in only me. And if you believe in only me, and like it was just goes on and on, like, oh, so many rules. And in fairness, a huge part of religion was to help rule society, right? To help govern society in the way that you wanted it to be governed, right? You can trace it in almost any religion, you can trace many of their rules and beliefs and the things that they have written down in their old books to like, oh, well, we're having a problem with sexually transmitted diseases, so you shouldn't have sex outside of marriage. That's what religion was used for a lot of times.
Yeah, before we had modern governments too, the way we do now. And now somehow modern government has become religious. So God only knows. Who knows? I'm so confused. So
Good stuff.
So okay, the next thing that I pulled out, I was a little bit, I kind of noodled it and I was like, I don't know. So it says on 64, all you really need to create a religion is an idea that can't be proven wrong, and then a set of rules surrounding that idea. And I was like, I don't know though, because I feel like we have plenty of stuff that has been proven wrong, specifically about Christianity. But that's, I think, I'm not picking on Christianity in that sense. I think it's just the one that I know the best because it's so predominant in America. Maybe if I lived in China or India or sub-Saharan Africa, I would have similar qualms with whatever is there. So I'm thinking, I mean, we talked earlier before about like the age of the earth and stuff like that. I mean, like Noah's Ark, right? It would have been built in the Middle East. How is there a polar bear on there? How were there penguins on there, right? Like, how did they get to the Ark? Like none of this stuff makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we have proven tons of this stuff to be wrong or illogical or impossible. And yet we still have those religious beliefs. So I thought that was like an odd definition of what you need to create a religion. What did you take from that? Is it me? Am I confused?
No, I don't think you're confused. I know I thought for me, like a lot of cults are a perfect example of this. Anyone outside of it can look at it and be like, that doesn't make any sense. That's illogical. That's unfair. That doesn't, but there's, I think it's that thing that there's like enough truth that runs through it that people can hang on to the truth. And so I think this is one of those kind of nuanced things that if you remember the book is written for an kind of like 8 to 11, 8 to 12-year-old mind, I think it gets the point across. And then, you know, you have that next step where you're having discussions and some of your 8 to 12-year-olds are going to say that like, well, yeah, but it doesn't make any sense that blah blah blah, or why is Christianity convinced that Jesus was white when he's from the Middle East, or why, like these kinds of things. And you're like, okay, well, that's a good example. Like, let's talk about that. There are lots of cases, and lots of examples where it doesn't exactly line up. It's not logical, but this is what people have been told. And so why do people believe that? And again, kind of like I mentioned before, it's if you're having these conversations, it's pretty easy to look at like, so is that thread of truth that's woven throughout that allows you to believe these things? Is that what helps people then make that leap to believing conspiracy theories and being all in on conspiracy theories? And what's the difference, right, between religion and myth and mythology and conspiracy theories? And I mean, it's a fascinating topic for a kid who likes that kind of critical thinking.
Mhm. It's fascinating for me. They throw a cult documentary on Netflix and I am there. The day it launches, I am there. I'm obsessed. It's the best.
No. Love this. All right. So I think I have the last comment in this section, and it's just on page 66. The quote says, "Belief is some really powerful stuff. And now that you know all about how our beliefs are made and how they're related to religion, you can use logic and evidence to decide for yourself what makes the most sense." And I think for me, that's the part that kind of wrapped up what we were just talking about a couple pages earlier in this chapter. People take a religion and they hold on to it. But if you're applying the scientific method, you can probably evaluate that and be like, well, this doesn't line up and that doesn't line up and this doesn't make sense. And for some people, they're going to say, you know what, that's okay. That's not a deal breaker. And for other people, they're going to be like, you know what, that's a deal breaker. And I had plenty of deal breakers, again, which is why we don't church at all. And I'm assuming your family, we don't talk about it because we're a secular podcast, but your family does have a faith that you follow. And so I'm sure there are a few inconsistencies there. I don't think there's any religion out there, system of belief that you're like 100% all in, like, but they weren't deal breakers, right? So,
Well, and I think Judaism is a strange nut too compared to Christianity or any of the others, because Judaism is a culture and a religion. And so
mhm.
it's interesting because you're always going to be Jewish, whether you're practicing or not, you are Jewish. And so I think it's interesting because we've got a lot of questions, like a lot about the religious aspect of things. I think for us, there's just been, I mean, even just the whole thing about like a benevolent God, and you see all the horrific things that go on. And it's like, you're telling me this is all part of the plan of a benevolent being? Like, I'm struggling with that. I'm really having a tough time. So, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so culturally, but then the religious side of things, we've got some really big questions ourselves. So,
Yeah. But, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that in a lot of religions. Not, the line isn't there as clearly, but even with Christianity, I think there are a lot of people who are culturally Christians because where they grew up, that's the thing, and they don't go to church and they don't read the Bible and that, but they do believe some of like the bigger mythology that goes along with them. And when they do a Christmas tree, it's not just a fun Christmas tree that they put decorations on, right? Maybe they do believe in the manger scene along with it or that sort of thing, but it's not that they actually really know what they're supposed to know to call themselves a Christian. And so again, it kind of becomes like cultural Christianity instead of like truly religious Christianity. And that's a whole other, I mean, you could just imagine like you could do an entire year study on the difference between cultural religion and like devout religion and be an interesting study.
Mhm. That it would. All right. So that
Right.
brings us to the conclusion. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So conclusion starts on 69. We both have the same quote. And let me just scroll through. There we go. Okay, so we're just kind of wrapping up the thoughts in this section about belief versus logic and fact and the scientific method and stuff like that. And it says here that's why it's best to be a person who thinks about and studies the world around them. Just like a scientist, you need to know for sure what's going on. And for me, I just thought like that explains so beautifully why we see this epic attack right now on the Department of Education, on books and access to books, on universities. I mean, this access to knowledge, this free thinking power that we have as human beings. I mean, JD Vance, did you see that speech where he was like, they are radicalizing people and it's dangerous talking about colleges and things like that. And so, yeah, because it's the first time kids have left the bubble and the messaging that they've been taught since they were really little, and they might experience something else and start to question. And so, if that's radicalizing people, then that's what you'd like to call it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just thought like, I mean, an educated population is harder to control and harder to steer and harder to lead. And so that's not welcome in the current world that we're living in right now.
Yeah. No, that's so true. Well, just the next page after that on page 70, I pulled out a quote kind of continuing on with this theme. It says, "But no matter what our religion is or what color our skin happens to be, no matter where we live or what school we go to, all of us can try to base our ideas on the best information we have. In that way, we can help make the world a better, brighter place." And for me, again, it's that idea of like an educated society. And this is science. During the pandemic, it came up a lot where people are like, oh, like the science is wrong. The science is, and like, no, the science wasn't wrong. It evolved and it changed, right? We work with the best information we have. And the understanding of that information is that it is always changing and evolving. That's the point of science. And that's probably where there's that big breakdown because that's not the point of religion. The vast, vast majority, there may be some religions out there, but the vast, vast majority of religions are not changing and growing and evolving with the times and taking in new information. They're like, this book is 2,000 years old and you will believe it. This book is 4,000 years old and these stories are super important and you must continue to follow them. And scientists are like, hey, we just published this new research and it was peer reviewed and it's pretty groundbreaking, but we think we should do some more research around that to make sure that we're like really right about this.
Yeah. And then there's homeschoolers memorizing all of these things from this book and having their children copy the book over again onto lined paper. So yeah, there we are, right?
Yep.
I just like the fact it kind of wrapped up that section by saying, remember not to take anything as fact unless there is enough evidence to back it up. And yeah, I mean, we run into a lot of problems with some of these texts and things like that when we are are following that guideline.
Yeah. Yeah, and then on the next page, right? I mean, again, it's the conclusion, so it's doing a great job of wrapping up. But the quote says, religions have also been used to make it seem okay when someone does something bad. And I know we both have ideas on that. But when I read it, the very first thing I thought was like, hello, the Crusades. Let's just slaughter a whole bunch of people in the name of our religion. But even beyond that, you have genocides of Native people, whether intentional or not. throughout history and in present day, and it's almost always supported and backed by religion, right? This idea of like it's done in the name of religion, so it's okay.
Mm. Yeah, I wrote down my two examples where the Taliban and the KKK come up, quite. I mean, the KKK was a Christian group, according to them, a bastardized
Yeah.
version of Christianity because Christianity is love thy neighbor. But they took their action in the name of God's holy crusade, and the Taliban being very, very similar. And obviously, that is not in alignment with the actual teachings of the Muslim faith, but it is kind of this. I used to explain it to students when I would in the same class that I taught that I mentioned before. We would talk. It's about feminism and stuff, and so we were talking about Malala at one point, and we talked about the Taliban being to the Muslim faith kind of like that game of telephone, right? Where you start off with
Mhm.
like, I like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And by the end, it's like, my giraffe has spots. And I'm like, yeah, they're in the my giraffe has spots camp, which is clearly not what their holy book says, because their holy book says, I like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But that's what happens, right? It's been morphed and evolved. And there are people who are saying, yes, this is the teachings of our religion. And I'm like, not, right? And you even have so many Muslim people who are like, trust us, it's not, right? That is not what we are about. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. And, I mean, that's one of those interesting things. I don't know if the other books in the trilogy will talk about it, but it is worth it if you're talking with your kids and you're learning about these things and kind of diving in to really look at who had access to writing, who had access to books, and what language those were in, and how things were translated. And if we were to go back and try to look at original text and translate them now, would we translate them differently? I mean, we like to believe that translators are unbiased and impartial, but that's not the case. It's not 100% the case. And how does that change things? And then how many different times can it be translated? It's an interesting way to look at it and think about it, I think. Okay, I'll get off that random tangent. We're homeschoolers. We can do a rabbit hole like nobody's business. I will just say that this book, it kind of wraps up this. I liked this paragraph as like the wrap up for this part of the trilogy. It's on page 72, and it says, the next step in our journey together will be to learn the histories of the world's most popular gods and religions, how they changed each other and outsiders, and more about how they are mostly an attempt to explain the dark and unknown. We'll also learn why no religion is quote unquote better or more right than any others. So, yeah, with that, I was like, okay, I'm excited to read the next one.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be good.
Yeah. Okay. So that about wraps us up for this episode. But before you go, can we just ask a quick favor? Wherever you're listening, however you're listening or watching, would you please go just give us a quick like, a follow, leave a review. We have a lot of likes and follows in a lot of places. Reviews are super helpful. We would be just super grateful. Like we sit here, we talk about religion in this book. We're secular, right? But we're talking about religion with this book, and we are reminded, right, of just how easy it is for religious homeschoolers to find each other because they put on their nice Sunday clothes and they go to the same watering hole each Sunday or Saturday or Wednesday, or depending on how devout you are, all of the days. And they get to find each other. But as secular homeschoolers, many of us are lacking the ability to really find our people. We don't have that meeting point. And so the reality is we have an algorithm that we're dealing with. And so the more likes and follows we have, the more visible our podcast becomes. And the easier it is for us to find more like-minded homeschoolers. So please take a minute to like, review, share, and thank you so much for helping us just reach more people who are desperately looking for their people. We want to be their people.
There's so many secular homeschoolers who are like, am I the only one? So you are not, we promise. Share the podcast, spread the word, rate it, all that good kind of stuff. Yep. So next week we will be continuing with book 2 of the trilogy. So we can't wait to welcome you then. And in the meantime, happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a great one.